I think this is the most important year for Bitcoin that has ever existed. We are probably days away from a series of ETFs being approved. And so this is the moment for Bitcoin to use that old term, cross the chasm and really see mainstream adoption, where our parents and our grandparents understand what it is, can buy it, and then do buy it. If all of this comes to pass, Bitcoin will be a part of the traditional financial lexicon by the end of 2024. So that is my most anticipated trend of the year.
The buzz around the approval of a spot Bitcoin exchange-traded fund is gaining traction, drawing in notable figures like billionaire investor Chamath Palihapitiya. Despite his earlier skepticism about the state of crypto in America, Palihapitiya now anticipates a significant impact on Bitcoin and the broader digital asset space with the potential approval of a spot Bitcoin ETF. In a recent podcast episode, he makes 4 key predictions for 2024, a pivotal year for Bitcoin marked by ETF approvals and increased institutional involvement, mainstream adoption, widespread acceptance even among older generations, and Bitcoin becoming a commonplace term in traditional financial discussions. Palihapitiya envisions the SEC's approval as a catalyst for broader adoption, foreseeing a future where purchasing and holding Bitcoin becomes accessible to individuals of all ages, including those less technically inclined. This shift, he believes, could commence this week with the expected SEC approval of several spot Bitcoin ETF applications. The podcast also features insights from entrepreneur and investor David Sachs, whose predictions, though not directly tied to Bitcoin, are seen as potential catalysts for positive movements in crypto prices throughout 2024. Additionally, the discussion touches on the much-anticipated Bitcoin super cycle and BlackRock's recent surprising $2 billion investment in Bitcoin.
Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to drop your comment and observations in the comment section below. Thanks and enjoy the video.
My biggest business deal is whatever the Fed decides to do to replace or extend BTFP, the Bank Term Funding Program. Remember that the BTFP, which is what the Fed used to bail out the regional banking system last year, in was it like March or April, it was only supposed to last for 1 year. It's supposed to be a temporary program. But I do not think that the balance sheets of regional banks are healthy enough to survive without this continued liquidity from this program. So I think the Fed's going to have to do something to either replace the program, extend the program. They're going to have to do something. And I think that regional banks are still in pretty bad shape with, impaired commercial debt portfolios. And they need this liquidity as long as the yield curve remains inverted. So I think the Fed is going to try and somehow figure out a program to keep these guys liquid until they can de-invert the yield curve. And I think the Fed's trying to massage all of this into place without there being a recession. I'm not trading on these predictions, so you shouldn't either. My guess here, just a guess, is energy. Energy stocks, energy prices could be among the top performers of 2024, just because there's so much risk of conflict breaking out now and escalating. So I agree with Freeberg that there are huge risks of escalation in the Middle East. The Ukraine war is still going on. I think not enough attention is being paid to what's happening between Venezuela and Guyana. Venezuela is basically attempting to annex Guyana's offshore oil reserves, which are huge. This is basically just pure theft. Ethiopia also has tense relationships with a few of its neighbors, and I could easily see there being a war that breaks out between Ethiopia and Egypt, or Ethiopia and Eritrea. And then that could spill over and create further disruption in the Red Sea. We also still have this unresolved issue of the Houthis. And of course, you have neocons braying for war with Iran, as they always do. John Bolton just published another piece saying that we had to go to war with Iran. So there's just so many ways that the conflict could escalate and create, I think, a spike in the price of oil.
As previously mentioned, we hold a strong belief that the two predictions from Sachs, particularly the one regarding the most significant deal of 2024 and the other about the best performing asset during the year, will be advantageous for Bitcoin. Reflecting on last March's regional banking crisis, the Federal Reserve Board introduced the Bank Term Funding Program to extend collateralized loans to various financial institutions. Despite the one-year program approaching its end, recent data from the Fed reveals a record-high borrowing of $141 billion from the BTFP in the week through January 3rd. This substantial borrowing, so close to the program's deadline, raises the possibility of another banking crisis, which could prove detrimental to the economy but potentially beneficial for Bitcoin. SAC's prediction concerning escalating geopolitical tensions worldwide is another positive factor for the leading cryptocurrency. In times of global turmoil, investors tend to seek refuge in safe haven assets, and Bitcoin is arguably one of the safest options. As promised earlier in the video, we will now share clips from a recent discussion between Quito's Michelle McSay and Andrew Axelrod, a global macro and Bitcoin commentator. Andrew strongly advocates that this could be the much-anticipated Bitcoin supercycle, and the upcoming clips from the discussion will provide further insights.
Historically, Bitcoin has a halving event every 4 years. So one of these 4 years is one cycle. It's one epoch. And so for people that have been in Bitcoin for a while, they tend to think in these terms of cycles. At some point, maybe a cycle is going to break down. I think that you mentioned the super cycle. That's where I think Dan Held originally coined that term. But what it essentially means is that a super cycle is just when the cycles essentially break down and you start getting you start getting price action that seems to break this pattern of. It's usually again a 4-year cycle. So out of those 4 years, it's 3 years of green and one year of red. And so a super cycle would imply that, and it's feasible, especially with all of these new entrants coming in, because this isn't just a one-time event. This would be, as you were saying, these would be pension funds. These would be all kinds of allocators putting in a steady stream. It's a little bit a cookie cutter, but essentially what's happening here is they now have a fixed allocation to this new asset class, which they will be able to access through an ETF. And then it's just a question of, all right, every quarter or so, we got to rebalance and the money keeps flowing and flowing. And that could sort of, and the dimensions here would, break all of the, what we've seen from retail traders up until now. So that's what a super cycle would mean here, which is that there's a steady stream that's pouring into absolute scarcity. And that would have, a shock on the price, and it would break this 4-year cycle. Is sort of at least that's sort of the thinking behind a super cycle. We haven't seen it yet. Might not happen this time. But yeah, when I'm talking about a cycle, that's what I'm talking about.
Do you think we'll get the super cycle then?
I thought we could have seen it last time, because you started seeing companies putting it on their on their balance sheets. Now, admitted, it was pretty much just MicroStrategy and maybe Square, but yeah, I think it's a definite possibility. I mean, as this thing becomes more acceptable, you see more mainstream, more institutional adoption. It'll become just another fixture. It'll just become another tick the box exercise on these investment committees. The thing is, there's always a moment in time where it's sort of that last price that you've seen. So for example, when I first got into Bitcoin, the price was around 300 and there's no going back. Like I'm not going to see that price. I'd love to see that price again. I'm not going to see it again. And so at some point,
well, you'd love to see it so that you can pick it up again at 300 is I guess what you're saying.
Exactly. I would love a time machine is what I'm saying.
Okay. So you're saying though that 2024 could set up Bitcoin for a super cycle.
I'm saying it's a definite possibility.
Now, it's time for the most significant revelation regarding Bitcoin ETFs in this video. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager and a prominent Bitcoin ETF applicant, appears to be gearing up for a groundbreaking launch. Bloomberg ETF analyst Eric Balchunas suggests that it could surpass all previous records for first-day trading volume and assets under management for any ETF in history. Reports indicate that BlackRock has secured an impressive $2 billion in capital for its imminent spot Bitcoin ETF launch. During a Twitter Spaces discussion hosted by the Block, VanEck's head of digital assets research, Matthew Siegel, shared this insight. While he acknowledged that he couldn't fully vouch for the news, Siegel revealed that, according to a well-placed source, BlackRock is expecting over $2 billion in new incremental flows within the first week, primarily from existing Bitcoin holders looking to augment their positions. Balchunas, reacting to the news, emphasized the monumental impact this would have for Bitcoin, especially considering BlackRock's historical dominance in successful ETF launches. The anticipation further intensifies as Fox Business reports that BlackRock anticipates approval for its spot Bitcoin ETF by Wednesday, January 10th, coinciding with the SEC's decision deadline for ARK Invest's spot Bitcoin ETF application. As we witness these bullish events unfold, including predictions and significant developments, the question of whether this will mark the onset of a super cycle for Bitcoin and crypto arises. Share your thoughts and observations on these events in the comments section below. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.